Let's go kill an elk.
You know, every hunt's tough in its own way, but I think this was the toughest hunt I've ever had. When your hero passes away mid-ship, but it definitely, my heart wasn't in it like normal. This is our bull. This is, dang sure isn't mine. Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin today at huntinfool.com.
Welcome back to the Built to Hunt podcast. I'm Brady, sitting here with Jerrod Lile and Promise Smith. And today we're going to talk about what is the story of Jerrod's Arizona Elk Hunt.
It's a big story. We'll try to keep it in reasonable chunks, but it's a big story. I guess to kick off, I started applying in Arizona when I was a super young kid, younger than you, Brady. Couldn't afford to do it. Used to sell shed antlers to pay for my points, and knew that at one point in time I wanted to hunt in the elk mecca that is Arizona. And over the years, I finally got to a point where I had enough points that I could have guaranteed myself several tags that were really, really good Arizona elk tags. But I also had opportunities to hunt lots of other things and Alaska numerous times, etc. So I kind of had them on the back burner. And then all of a sudden I started seeing the points swap around me, and units that I used to be 4 or 6 or more points ahead of, I could barely get. And so I got a little panicky because the states have been changing a lot of stuff lately. And I ended up applying for a unit that is a phenomenal elk unit, but not known for, at least recently, for great trophy potential. But it was important to me to have an experience, and it's like high altitude, kind of like what I grew up hunting elk in. And so I applied for that early in the winter. And then that spring, my mom called me and said that my dad was not doing well. And my dad's been one of the most durable, resilient people I know. Like, my dad has had health issues since 1984. He injured his leg falling timber in Alaska. Should have had his leg amputated immediately, didn't. He tied his foot back together and crawled out and got life flighted to 𝗙ecie𝗶𝗆, Alaska, from a remote island he was logging on, falling timber on. And then for like 11 years, my dad fought trying to keep his leg. It was 27 major surgeries, bone disease, skin grafts, bone grafts, muscle grafts, all the things. And finally in 1995, he had his leg amputated. And throughout that whole thing, he put the passion to be outside in myself, my sister, my mom too. I mean, they're both just like outdoors. They were built for redneck life in a good way. Kind of the theme we always shared together was, I wish I could go, right? My dad just couldn't get around good. By that time, he had, like I said, 11 years of just having your body trashed and thrashed by medical experiments was just not kind to him. And so that was kind of our common theme was, I'm glad you're going. I wish I could be there with you, that kind of thing. So this hunt was going to be no exception to me. I'll be all right. Gonna do this though.
Paper towel.
with some sandpaper.
We got like boxes of tissue paper back
Anybody got any paper sandpaper I can use? Anyway, one of my favorite things was always after I would kill a bull with my bow, like taking it to his house in Salmon, Idaho, and showing him, and we'd come out and reminisce and just enjoy the fact that he planted that seed and made me want to do that the rest of my life. And that was one way he could tangibly have a hands-on experience with it too, So I kind of had those same ideas in my head when the Arizona elk draw came out, and I drew the tag, which I kind of knew I was going to. Again, I had 23 points going into it, or 24, I can't remember. Enough, it was pretty much a guarantee. And then shortly after the draw results came out is when my mom reached out and said, your dad's doing poor. And again, like I said, he's been so durable and resilient that didn't mean everything to us, but we did rally as a family. We had like a small family reunion and just spent a ton of time loving on him. And he was not doing well. It was obvious that visually his health had slipped a lot. But again, he had been so kind of resilient that we all thought, well, he's going to bounce back, right? That's just how Dad operated. So throughout that summer, we spent a lot of time together as a family, which I will always be grateful for. We went back at least 2 more times to salmon, and then my dad's kidneys started failing, and so I helped my mom and dad move to Missoula, Montana in a camp trailer, and was keeping very close tabs on how Dad was doing because I still could turn the tag back in. I think that's probably the most important little detail about the story is there was this temptation in the back of my head throughout the entire journey from drawing the tag until the hunt of should I keep the tag or not, right? Ultimately, my dad was starting to rebound a little bit in August. He'd even been able to skip one of his dialysis appointments because his kidney function was doing well. We had visited him in the hospital a couple times, and he had got discharged from the hospital, was living in the camp trailer over in Missoula with my mom and doing outpatient dialysis when the hunt started. Brady, as you know, you were not available.
Yeah.
We wanted to film the hunt, but you were up playing around in Alaska with Isaiah and his brother Caleb filming a really awesome moose hunt up there that's going to be fantastic film for our channel and our effort too. And then, but Promise, you were available. Mm-hmm. Lucky you. So we headed to Arizona together. You were going to spend the first few days until Brady got there, and then all of us were going to finish the hunt out together. And man, I have rarely been that excited for a hunt in a long time. I think emotionally, I needed it, right? I really wanted to, again, the weight of my dad's health was heavy on all of our hearts. And B, it's just something you waited for almost a quarter of a century. I mean, that's no small thing in this day and age. I still remember the feeling of, I'll be all right. Anyway, I'll never forget the feeling I had, like just driving through the unit with my window down. I'll never forget the feeling I had driving through the unit, like the window down. It was that, September air, just like beautiful. Like Jed Larson, who I'm sure we'll touch on eventually in the podcast or the video with A3, came out to help me a little bit on the very last day of the hunt and was kind of a lifesaver. I promise you this is the worst part. And if you cry enough into these, they actually get soft. Just so you know. So Jed had said ahead of time, he goes, man, that's the most beautiful elk unit in the world to hunt. And I would probably give a strong second to that. Anyway, Promise and I didn't really have a great plan other than just cover a lot of ground and listen to bugles and chase elk around. I didn't have a bull in particular picked out. I know a lot of those elk come off the White Mountain Apache onto Unit 1 to rut. And we camped in a location that was pretty central to the unit that made it easy for us to, be an elk in minutes every day. Mm-hmm. I think the best one was when we left the camp in the morning, we could hear a bull bugling. And of course, I think I had us running late. I'll just take that one on the head. It probably was me. And we drove down off the hill and literally came around the corner in the side-by-side, and there's a beautiful 320 type bull just coming right at us. But anyway, it was great country, great habitat. Promise and I set up a nice wall tent camp. We got comfortable and just started hunting. And again, it was one of those deals where everywhere you went, there were elk. And so if anything, you got a little bit of paralysis by analysis trying to figure out where to find the big one, right? Because I did care. I had made up my mind, even with Dad's help, that I was going to take this tag right down to the wire. And the last half of the last day, I would compromise my standards. I use that term loosely because we love elk meat, and there's no disrespect ever meant in any harvest. I feel blessed every time I've ever shot an elk, from cows all the way up to nice bulls that I've shot. But I wanted to take it down to the wire and just maximize every second of the hunt. And so that's what Promise and I did. We got into bulls that first morning together, had a couple bulls come in, ducks and antelope and deer, and it was bighorn sheep. Oh yeah, bighorn sheep. We saw those on the second night, and then again towards the end. Yeah, it was just crazy beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I felt, again, that just was kind of like soothing my soul. So yeah, we hunted around, palled around for a few days. And then night number 4 came and woke up. It was dead quiet that night, which was weird because we were camped on a knob at like 9,900 feet. And the wind was pretty much always a companion, and it was just quiet. And I'm like, I need to turn on my fan app so I can sleep better. Promise, of course, was doing a great job over in her corner sleeping, showing me how to do it. Turned on my fan app, and I had to download the app. It had downloaded a partial update, so I was like, shoot. And I switched off airplane mode, and I got a text from my wife immediately that said, you need to call me something. It's about your dad. It's serious. Again, I still feel like he's such a durable human that it was like, well, he's taking a turn for the worse. Maybe we need to can the hunt, get home to the hospital, whatever. But I called Ruthie and she picked up immediately. Again, it's 2:30 in the morning. That's the kind of wife and partner I have. And she just said, I've got bad news. And I just remember it hit me. I was like, it's not just health, And so I just distinctly remember saying, is he gone? And yeah, she said, yeah, he is. In fairness, it was about as beautiful of a place that you could be told that kind of news. It was a super starry night. There were elk bugling in the background. Somehow it was okay, it has to be. We don't get the chance to not let it be okay. Through a few texts, I rounded up a conversation with my mom and sister, who was already with her, and it's like 3:30 in the morning. And my mom, one of the first words out of her mouth was, well, honey, you have to go back. You have to finish your hunt, Like, she just lost her partner of 54 years.
Unreal.
But that's just how tough she is, and how caring she is. It's like an intentional toughness, an awareness of other people that's unparalleled in today's world. I said, well, let's worry about that later. We'll go back on the hunt because I know Dad would want me to, and I know you want me to, but let's rally together as a family and love each other. And so, yeah, I kind of staggered around in the dark for about an hour. I knew your alarm was set for, I think, 4:30 or something like that. I knew it wasn't going to do any good to wake you up early because I know myself well enough to know that by the time we were going to get out of there, it was going to be noon the next day anyway. We had so much stuff. I mean, we moved down there it was going to be 2.5 weeks all in. And, I'm standing around, to be perfectly honest, so overwhelmed that I'm looking at even just the process of getting in my truck and getting home was overwhelming. Yeah, I staggered around in the dark for about an hour, watching the stars, listening to the elk, sitting on stumps and rocks and contemplating life. And then I heard Promise's alarm go off, and she's the first person in person that I got to share the worst news you ever want to share with, and I'll be eternally grateful for you being there. I remember you just fell into my arms and gave me the biggest, warmest hug, and we sat there under the dark. I will be forever grateful for that hug and that moment, and probably more importantly for what followed, because Promise, you immediately went into, for lack of a better term, mom mode. Honestly, I don't know any other way to describe it, because I was slightly functional and you were fully functional. Immediately started packing, asking questions. Do we need this? Do we need that? Thinking through things, because my brain had already started. To be honest, that hour I spent alone in the dark, I started a eulogy for my dad. His story is a complicated story, and I didn't want anybody else to tell it who hadn't experienced it. And I didn't want my mom or my sister to have to. I wanted my mom to be able to sit and enjoy us celebrating Dad's life, So those were the things that were running through my head was, how do I celebrate Dad's life? How do I share this story with the huge number of people that he's impacted? And when I say he, there is no story that happens without my mom. I ultimately, in the eulogy, decided to refer to him as a complicated hero, for lack of a better term. But no hero gets by without a cape, and my mom was definitely his cape throughout their entire life. So anything I say about him, you can't consider it without looking at the impact she had and her willingness to be a Bonnie to his Clyde. Promise, you saved my life. We packed all our crap up. I say you packed most of our stuff up. And then in typical fashion, it's my curse, but it got it from my dad. He got me one last time. My truck was dead. Remember that?
We got everything all taken care of.
Fully loaded. tent all buttoned up. Like, we are leaving. And I hop in and I don't even think it turned over. I think it was that dead.
Why did it die? Like, what?
Don Lile.
Just.
My dad.
You sat out there with the doors open, though, for...
Easy.
I'm just saying.
Suddenly your help isn't so valuable. No, I did. I had the doors open here and there. Well, and I think I sat out there on the call with my mom with the door open in the dark too. So I probably killed it. But click, click, click is the bottom line. Promise and I jumped in the side-by-side. Was it both of us or just me?
It was both of us, but first you tried to jumpstart the truck with a side-by-side battery.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We were going to leave that out.
Massive fail.
I've got video, or she has video of that I saw. That's just like, okay.
Like,
with a broken jumper cable too, right?
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah,
have
because
the
we were
clamp.
effing it. Yeah.
No lead.
That's a Jerrod Lile move too, by the way. So we hop in the side-by-side and go on walkabout looking for campers to find somebody who would drive up. And we'd also camped on top of a literal 4x4 goat trail. Yeah. It's not for everybody. And we found a lady in did she have a Subaru?
A new Tacoma.
Oh, that's right.
She had just
Little
bought the truck.
Tacoma. First of all, she looked at me like I was crazy, right? Like you drive into a single ladies camp right after daylight. Hey, will you jump in your car and drive up to my camp with me?
Eyes
Out
are
in-
puffy and swollen.
Yes,
Been
yeah, I've been crying all
for
night.
hours.
She definitely looked at me with a little bit of a dog eye. I think the saving grace was Promise was in the side-by-side. I think Promise saved that a lot. Anyway, she finally rounded her dog up. We get back up to the jumpstart the truck, and then she didn't even feel comfortable driving her car up or down. I think I drove her car up and down both.
Did you really?
Yeah, it's a nasty road.
It was a
You know what
nasty
that was
road.
like. So I drove her car up and then drove her back down. And then, yeah, as we were getting ready to say goodbye, she just asked if she could have a hug, and that was another good long cry. We just held each other for the longest time. And that's one of the strengths that my dad and mom both have always had. They've never met a stranger. Like, everybody's welcome under their roof, and I think this is one of those examples of just that, where I scared the heck out of some stranger asking her to come to my camp, and then by the time we're done, we're friends and in a long embrace. Got everything running and headed home. It was a long journey even just getting back home. Again, 9-10 hour drive back to Cedar City, another 9 hours to Salmon, all in a giant blur of trying to plan a memorial service and take care of everybody. I think if I remember right, you did plenty of driving, which again, saved my life. I fell asleep, like emotionally. I just finally crashed like a toddler and slept for hours while Promise drove us home. Finally made it back to Cedar, and then of course plugged in with my new support network, 𝗀cie, and her and I worked our way towards Salmon. It took us, because all the traveling, we ended up staying the night halfway. Got to the family, and in typical Don and Linda Lile fashion, their house had turned into a hostel. We had people flew in from Alaska, everywhere you could imagine, came down to celebrate Dad's life. And it was amazing. It was everything I would want it to be. We sat around, we played games, we laughed, we cried, we shared stories. We went through thousands of photos, probably, selecting them for a tribute that we could put on YouTube. We played songs that were important to my mom and dad in their courtship and throughout their life. In general, I would say we honored Dad's life the best you could when somebody goes too early. By the time it was done, we spent another day or two at the end, again, just loving on each other and spending time with family that had traveled in from everywhere. And not just family, like I said, everybody kind of becomes family with Don and Linda Lile. Blood doesn't matter a lot to them. DNA is not the important criteria for family. It's relationships, That's their entire currency. That was the currency of their marriage and their life. And it showed. Then we had another 20-hour drive to get back to Arizona eventually. Drove back to Cedar.
So I came back from Alaska,
Yep.
met up with Promise, and I think it was like that next morning.
So you're tired and hungry and cold and wet.
We both piled the Subaru full of stuff and drove down there because everything was already down there. And we got there, it was like 4 hours ahead of him?
Yeah, by the time I got there, actually, you invested the extra time in camp. It was like a Taj Mahal, like Christmas lights and ornaments and a little rock patio. I was like, what in the world? which was nice. You know, it was nice to come home to that. And obviously that first hug back was just awful. I think there's a little clip of me giving you a hug, Brady, and took me out.
Me too.
All of those firsts are hard, you know, after somebody passes like that. Even getting back to the camp where it all went down it took me a minute. We all hopped back into hunt mode, and in all honesty, I don't think I could think of a better way to have tried to recover. I was bitter about the circumstances happening in the middle of a hunt I'd waited 20 plus years to acquire. I don't think you cannot not be, but in hindsight, I am so thankful that I had the very thing that Dad had anchored me to the natural world through, was hunting, and specifically archery elk hunting. I had that, the best possible tag you could concoct to come back to. It wasn't hard to find elk. They were, you know, kind of everywhere we looked, you could find some elk, and elk were bugling, and like my heart was healing kind of every day. Honestly, with you two too, laughter is always a huge part of healing. Again, we laughed the whole weekend that we celebrated my dad's passing, because that's how we grew up, you know, and that's how I think you heal. So we had a lot of laughs, a lot of good times. I'll be honest, I felt like I had forgotten how to call elk in particular. I didn't call much because I didn't think you should. That's how I've kind of become a better elk hunter in public land, highly pressured areas. But B, even when I would, it was like, I don't know if there was just too many elk or not, because at the end, finally at the very end, I was able to call elk in without you two. But we didn't get a single one of those point blank, really cool call-ins that I was just jonesing for in Arizona to have that, you know, a raghorn at 4 yards or whatever. So the hunt was surprisingly hard still. Looked at piles of elk at night in the spotlights. We looked at piles of elk during the day, and I was very picky and very quick to decide, nope, that's not him, that's not him, that's not him. And we looked at a lot of really pretty bulls during that time. Well, I think we started back, was there only 4.5 nights left, I think? Those went by really fast.
Oh my gosh, when you think about it, it's like...
Yeah, next thing you know, it's literally the second to last night. And then we had a really cool experience, the three of us together. Elk weren't talking much. We finally got a bull to very quietly and timidly bugle up on the hill above us. And we kind of charged after him, got up on a nice little bench, could tell that's kind of where the elk were going to want to funnel down through. I didn't love where we were at. By that time, we kind of caught each other coming into each other, and we still had a good opportunity. He pushed a cow by me at 27 yards broadside, and the bull was probably in the mid 340s. Like, he was big enough on the second to last night. I was going to shoot him. As elk tend to do, he ended up bumping up and finding more cows, and he was trying to get all of them to come down there at once. And by the time he was behind them, it was too late. We had one big old patrol cow in our lap at like 6 yards, and her eyes were like, boom.
Well, we're all standing there in the open. I remember it was like you and me, and then Promise was a little more behind cover because she was able to...
Yeah, just kind of quartered off a little.
Exactly. But still, I'm sitting there with a camera, nothing in front of me. I think we had our backpacks on still. It was just like, well, this is happening. And you started seeing them come down, and you're like,
yeah, I'm like,
oops.
I know how this ends.
Yep.
I've been in this chapter of this book before, and it's never ended well. I mean, it was a really cool encounter, and you know, we had cows all over top of us, and a really cool experience. And again, part of the healing process, right? And I got back to camp that night, and I had missed a call from Jed, and he offered to come hunt with us the next day. Just no strings attached. He said he had a little spot that had treated him good at finding giant bulls in the past. I've almost never said yes to that. Well, I don't know that I ever have said yes to that kind of offer in the past, but I needed a break. I was tired of making decisions. I was just emotionally exhausted, physically.
We were all tired.
We all were, right?
Yeah, it was just, like you said, the emotions of it made it tough. And we've talked about this a lot. Like, gosh, it's just so much weight to carry every day. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's also something that takes a toll after a few days of hunting. And not only hunting, we were up at
3, 4 every morning.
Yeah, exactly.
And going to bed well after dark because we were trying to spotlight and find out. We were doing it justice.
We're giving it all
we
we
were
had.
hitting it hard.
Not napping in the middle of the day because we were driving across the unit just to go look at some more small elk.
Yep.
But I remember that being really tiring and not feeling like we had a reason to be so tired because we weren't hiking super hard. We were sitting in the side-by-side. So that was mentally a little bit kind of demeaning as well. Just like, oh, I'm so tired, but why?
But why?
Yeah, it's just long.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also forgot I had gotten a cold.
Oh, gosh.
Shocker. You know, I'm at my emotional and physical low. Go home and shake hands and hug people and kiss babies. 400 strangers. I come back with an awful cold. I mean, I was miserable.
Yeah.
So Jed calls and says, I'd like to take you, if you don't have a plan tomorrow. And I said, well, I have one, but it's not as good as yours, period, because I just want somebody else to make the decisions, And, if you say, let's go right, I want to go right. I've never been on a guided elk hunt in my life, and this is the closest thing I've ever had. So he's like, okay, well, meet me here at this time in the morning. I don't even know if I want to finish this part of the story. For once in Jerrod's life, he's early. All of us.
And we're talking like 3:30 a.m.
Yeah, we had to leave at 3:30, I think. We decided to take the truck instead of the side-by-side for the first time the entire hunt. We'd always hunted out of the side-by-side. So we jump in the truck, bomb down, get to the parking lot. Jed had just rolled in. Meet Jed for the first time. I've never met him in person, right? I've never met him in person. I've talked to him on the phone, followed him on Insta for 15 years or whatever. We get all the kind of the small talk out of the way, and I go to reach for my bow, and it is not there. I literally felt physically ill. I felt like I just wanted to puke. I have not felt that awful as an adult very many times in my life because I feel like I was letting Jed down too.
Who got up at this earlier
than us to get to that location.
To get there to help someone that he hadn't met for no payment.
It was awful. I felt so bad. And I look at Jed and I just go, I left my bow on my side-by-side. And I'll never forget it. He literally just looked at me and he goes, well, hurry. And I was like, you got it, buddy. And so then we all decided to go back up together. I'm not sure why.
Well, because we didn't want to just sit
you don't
in
know
Jed's
Jed
truck.
yet. Yeah. So we hop in my truck and I do my best to blow the transmission getting back up to camp.
Rally in this clapped out tundra.
Rocky road to camp.
4 in the morning.
Yeah.
As hard and fast as you can beat a pickup truck up a road without wrecking. So I get up there, snag the bow, get back in. I'm still wearing the cone of shame. And again, keep in mind, that morning my fever was breaking. It was going in and out and I'm going through cold sweats and just miserable. Rip back down, we jump out and Jed takes off, and I'll give Jed credit. Even when I'm not sick, I think he'd be a hard human to keep up with. The boy we were late, so he's got to do his job. He's trying to leg us in there, and it's several miles, fairly flat, fairly easy walk till the end. And I'm passing fevers. Sweat is running out of every pore of my body, and we're charging in. I'm coughing, and anyway, I felt so relaxed to have somebody, even when Jed would call, he sounded awesome, first of all. His call sounded great. Timing, cadence, all the things that I care about, he checked all those boxes, and I didn't have to make a decision. And I was exhausted. I was at the end of it. I didn't even care. To be honest, the only reason I was even hunting at that point was because I knew it would kill me to later know that I hadn't. Then in typical Jerrod Lile fashion and luck, we get up to this knob that he is so expectant to get to. He's just lit to get there. We don't see a single elk or hear a single elk.
But we're in this huge basin. There was a lot of country that we could hear.
It's so much country and it was quiet enough. You could have heard them. They just weren't there. And I'm looking at Jed and he was
sweating about like you were when you
Forgot your bow.
Yeah, he's sitting there just I don't understand, And I chuckled and I looked at him and I said, hey, this is just Jerrod Lile luck, man. I said, just enjoy the program. It is what it is. And we sat there for probably 15, 20 minutes, didn't hear a bugle, couldn't see an elk anywhere in this huge basin and decided to head out. So last morning of the last day, we got a big skunker. We hot-footed it all the way back out to the truck, got to the truck and Jed said, well, hey, do you want to, there's one little spot that I can call into and sometimes some resident elk hang out. And I said, sure. At this point, I'm desperate, whatever. So we drive up and then he says, well, go ahead and bugle. And I looked at him and I was just like, please, just hold my hand. That's all I want right now. I got nothing. And so he ripped a bugle and a bull screamed right back. Do you want to go? And I'm like, heck yeah, I want to go. So we all hot-footed it down into the bottom. We played around with two bulls that were probably 320, 330 type bulls, real pretty 6 points. Bulls that I had already promised myself I would shoot on the last day. And it just didn't feel right to me, to Jed, or to you two. I could see it in your faces. The other part though is I didn't know if I was seeing, let's just be over it, period, in your faces, or this isn't the right scenario. And it might have been a little bit of both. I just feel like none of us wanted me to shoot one of those bulls.
Oh, yeah.
The reasons why I think are different for all three of us a little
It just didn't feel right for you. For some reason, it just didn't feel like it was your time.
I agree.
I was like 50% that and then 50%, okay, we literally parked the truck and walked down here and we're not going to kill an elk right now, and this is a 8-day film and I can't make a damn story out of this. Nope.
Yeah, we had just stepped off the road.
Yeah, we weren't 3/4 of a mile from the truck.
It's like a side
Easy
quest.
walk. I mean, first of all, as I was looking at the bulls, I was like, man, they're beautiful. They're young. I don't want to shoot one of those very bad, but I kind of felt guilty because I'm like, Brady and Promise had like been my rock, right? Promise was the first person I talked to about my dad's death. Like at this point, I felt like it was our hunt, not my hunt, right? So I'm whispering to you guys, hey, I think I want to pass him up. Like, are you okay with that? And you're like, absolutely. And so then we go into negotiation mode with Jed because we're like, well, where would you go for the last night?
Well, I thought it was funny because I felt like Jed was kind of looking at you and us three, and Jed's like, what are you doing asking the camera guy? Like, do you want him or not? Like, shoot him or let's get out of here.
Well, and he didn't really want you to shoot that bull either.
No,
He didn't.
After I said I was going to pass, it was visible relief
He
on
was
his
like-
face.
Yeah.
In fact, he literally
my
said,
goodness.
thank you.
Yeah.
He literally said, thank you. Which I understand. Again,
Yeah, that's his lifestyle.
yeah, and where they're at. And they were good bulls, genetically speaking, that were just young, you know. So Jed tells us, well, I would go, he sends us like literally about as far from the road as you can get for an evening hunt, which we've already burned tons of boot leather this morning, miles and miles. And he's like, I would be there tonight. And I looked at you guys, I was like, are you down? And you're like, we're down. Like, oh, great.
Jared's hoping we say no.
Because we knew it was going to be at least 5 miles one way from the truck on foot to get there. Granted, a lot of it on a good trail, but still that's a long walk at the end of a hard hunt, emotionally and physically. And you guys were down. And I'll never, ever be able to thank you guys enough for that because, you know, when we took off, I remember feeling a little skip in my step. I'm like, all right, we got
It felt
this.
good.
And then about 2.5 miles in, I'm like, holy cow, this is a long walk. And then at about 4.5 miles, you're like, why am I doing this on the last night of my hunt? Because, you know, during that time, we hadn't heard or seen an elk, which you wouldn't expect to kind of going up this gut. And then, we finally made it up onto a little bridge.
I got to bring you back a bit because I think you're forgetting one small detail, which was that little creek that ran the entire trail and how we all talked about it, I think, on the way in. Like, gosh, this hike would suck, but it's kind of just pretty enough.
The creek makes me happy.
Yeah, a little bit of water running down, green grass. It was like
meadows.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful walk and a beautiful day. Like, just one of
gorgeous.
those, as good of a September day as you can get, you know.
feet in the creek, sitting there at that rest spot.
I do remember I kept telling myself to just soak it in. I was like, this is the only time you're probably ever going to hunt Arizona, no matter what's happened. And honestly, your dad would love to be here. And again, I had a small vial of his ashes with me as a reminder, but I just remember thinking my dad would do anything to be here. So, pardon my French, but don't be a little and quit, because what I wanted to do is quit, you know. We climbed up on a little ridge after we left the main trail finally and got up on a nice little ridge and just kind of kicked back. Everybody was going to take a little 𝗙𝗵𝗇cie, and we heard a bull bugle. Yeah, and he bugled a few times. He bugled back at me when I'd call, and so we kept waiting for the wind to switch because it was not ideal. At some point in time, it was going to be dark. And so we started just kind of getting more and more aggressive, moving toward this bull. And there was 2 big sounding bulls in the basin. And at that point, you just have to pick one. You've got one shot. It's going to happen before dark. You just hope you guess right. I still don't know what the other bull will look like. We don't care.
That's right.
We moved toward the one that the wind was the best for, still sounded big, dominant. And we watched some of his cows actually run off as we were approaching, and I thought maybe we had spooked them, but I think it was just elk being elk. It was kind of a windy September night, and they're feeling froggy. About that time, I got my first look. I think you actually saw him first, as usual.
He's got a funny way of doing that.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that
kind of annoying.
She's got some eagle eyes, which I'm very grateful for, by the way, both of you guys. Anyway, I get down and I look, and I'm like, the bull instantly looks wide, heavy, and more importantly, he just was older. Like, I could just tell he had a big old wide head. I just looked at you immediately and I said, I want to shoot that bull. If we can get close enough, we're going to kill him. As fate would have it, he left his herd and started angling our direction. I had never made a call.
Yeah,
had not made a single call in an hour or more. And he just started working his way down. I ranged an opening at 51 yards. We were in a really tight pickle of downfall. We had a 4-foot spruce on one side, and we couldn't get any closer, is the bottom line, without making a huge racket. So I ranged it a couple times, and I'm like, well, when he comes through there, I got a good shot opportunity. He'll be broadside. All of a sudden, he's ambling, slow, feeding, and then he just kind of gets that quick walk and like walks almost all the way through my shooting lane. And I like scream on the cow call, rip the bow to full draw, and he stops with more of his vitals covered than I wanted to shoot. And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Meanwhile, when I ripped my bow back, I elbowed you in the face.
In the camera.
In the camera's face.
In the camera's lens, yeah.
So boom, I hit the camera, which of course throws you off a little bit, like, holy cow, I just hit my partner back here. And then I needed to step to my right to get against this downfall.
But I was to your right a little bit.
But you
too.
were to my right. So I start to take a step and I hook the side of my foot on said rock and literally fell onto the big spruce downfall. But I kind of like fell onto it with my hip. I'm still at full draw. And then I'm like leaning way out and finally find the right spot with my 50-yard pin and cut the shot. And the shot felt great, but at the last second, I saw it hit him back kind of in the middle of the body. And I'm flopped over on the spruce log. Brady's been elbowed in the face. Thankfully, he's still running the camera. Promise, you're probably just looking at all of us like, what a bunch of clowns. Did you know I hit him?
No, I didn't know you hit him. I was just so nervous. We had like 15 minutes of light left, and this was the last bull
Was it?
we were going to get a shot at, and you're going to draw, and you trip.
I hit him too far back because what happened is it hit a spruce branch about 10 yards in front of him, right at kind of the apex of the arrow. And it deflected. You can kind of see it on camera once you finally, like when we really zoomed in and looked at it, and it actually cuts a little chunk of spruce off. But I do remember you saying, I want to throw up.
Yeah, I just felt like my stomach was upside down. And I was just sitting behind you guys the whole time trying to locate him because he was kind of sitting behind trees, and I was just waiting, and I wasn't sure when he was going to come through, and it was all so fast that he stepped through, that happened, and that you released.
And the weird part is, like you said, there's weeks of this hunt and preparation and everything, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, here's 20 seconds, 30 seconds that you had to make it all happen. What?
Just trapped in that spot, no light. That's the last guy.
It was literally our last stand.
Without question.
Yeah, it was either going to happen then or we were going to eat the tag. I wanted to get one for my dad too at that point, to be honest. For whatever reason, that bull just felt right. Like across the board, I glanced at him for 4 seconds. I don't know how long. And I did think he had 3 brow tines because he's got these super stubby, straight, kind of beefy brow tines, and it looked like he had 3 on one side. And I was like, kind of a cool older bull. Didn't matter. At the end of the day, I hit the bull, and fortunately, I got another good look at him. About 50 or 100 yards later, he came out in the edge of the trees, and I could see a huge red spot right in the center of the body. So I knew it was a liver shot, definitely lethal, but we were going to need to spend some time. Yep. And we were 5.2 miles from the truck. So it's one of those where it's like, well, we're not going to deadhead 10.5 miles to walk all the way back out and get comfy. Let's build a shelter. And then in typical Promise fashion, and Brady, you two are bad for each other. What did we do, Promise?
We built like a hut.
A castle.
A castle.
Let's call it a castle. Let's call it what it is.
It was a home.
We had 2 main beams and a ceiling and some...
The walls were all legit. I think you could have spent the winter in there. And we were at 10,000 feet of elevation, too.
Well, we had no gear.
That's
we had
what's
nothing.
funny.
We had like a mid-layer and maybe like a light jacket.
It was a half-day hunt. We're like, we're going to kill something in there and have to carry it out 5 miles, so let's go light. We didn't have that much for food, like nothing. No water. We ran out of water. Thankfully, I had those little pills because we didn't take a water filter. I can't do it any other way, I guess. I just had to have a last-minute Hail Mary opportunity that we mostly capitalized on. Honestly, I think building that shelter in hindsight probably was just a distraction for all 3 of us.
I think it was.
We're all full of adrenaline and fatigue, and so we distracted ourselves by building the Taj Mahal. And then we did curl up for a couple hours. I just remember spiders crawling over me the whole time.
Really?
Oh yeah, every time I turned. I was down in that duff pile and it was just spider heaven. Like this is not fun. Finally woke up, proceeded to try to go find the bull, and in typical Jerrod fashion again, I found first blood that was not first blood.
It was first mud?
First mud. I hate that about myself so bad because I'm colorblind with reds and greens especially. But yeah, we got up there, we looked for my arrow for a little while. because I couldn't tell if it had passed all the way through or not. It hadn't, it turns out, but I thought it had. Again, that stuff happens really fast in your head. Looked for my arrow, couldn't find it, and then started looking for blood. I found first mud and distracted everyone for a little while, and then Promise actually found first blood.
Yeah.
And it was a big, it was like, it looks good.
Yes.
It was encouraging. But even then, as those trails tend to go, even with 2 great blood trailers with me, you guys both see blood amazing, man, we just kept losing it. And then I finally started cutting some bigger circles because I was trying to use my nose to smell him. I had told Brady, I think, ahead of time, I was like, a whistle means you found him. Like, we're not whistling at each other just to get in touch. Like, that means you found him. And all of a sudden I heard a whistle. And I get goosebumps talking about it. Because again, I knew the bull was dead, but it was our bull. And I'm actually glad that, I think you found it. Did you find it or Brady?
I found him.
Yeah, I was like past, because that blood trail had ran out, and we all kind of just split up and meandered, milled around. And,
on steep downfall, ferns this tall. It was awful.
it was hard.
It was a really bad place to
Yeah,
look
it really was.
for a wounded animal. But yeah, I heard a whistle. And I'm like, that's one of those where it's like, you better not be joking with me right now.
I think that's what you said. You're like, you know what a whistle means, right? Like ready to kick some ass and cry.
I'm too tired to be messed with right now. And I get up there, and out of the corner of my eye, I could see antler sticking out of the ferns, but I didn't even care. I just went straight to Promise, gave her a huge hug. So I don't care what the bull looks like at this point. This is our bull. We got him. And then the reality sets in of that much sleep deprivation, that much emotional deprivation. You're 5.5 miles from the truck, but no 2 people I'd rather be with again. I was able to, a couple times, you guys probably noticed, but a couple times I just sat there quietly while you 2 were working, just thinking about Dad and what the hunt meant to me. And healing, all that stuff. And eventually, as it always happens, we got the bull broke down and got most of him loaded up. We knew we were going to have one more trip, but we decided I'd go back in there solo. I kind of needed some therapy of my own, to be honest. Mm-hmm. A couple times that happened after Dad passed. I remember we were sitting at that tank that one day, and I just said, hey, can I just have a walk by myself, And you guys were great. Again, that's where that comfort level feels so different, to have somebody that can just let you go be while you're healing. But we got most of the bull loaded up and heavy packs for way too long of a trek back out. Promise you had way too much weight for a lady of your petite nature. But thank you.
You're welcome.
The pounds in the pack versus pounds on the body. The ratio was a little off between you 2.
The ratio was not fair, let's be honest.
I was just thinking, I am not making another trip back in here.
No, it was partially your determination to just be like, I ain't coming back. That you're just like, yeah, put that in there, put that in there, put that in there. Yeah. Okay. And eventually, like all pack outs do, no matter how long they are, they eventually end. And you guys, again, I needed time even on that pack out, and I hung back a little bit, probably partially physically, but mostly it was emotionally. And you guys just did your thing and got there a little bit ahead of me. And I've never been to the point where I was counting like 5 to 9 steps at a time. Mm-hmm. Normally it's like 100 minimum or whatever, but I was like, that flower, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That piece of gravel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You finally get there, and you guys, as always, got everything to the truck. You guys had already got it in the shade, taking care of the meat, all the things that I appreciate and respect about both of you too. And I don't think I've ever been happier to see a truck, but for a whole host of different reasons than I've ever had before.
Back to the moment when we found him, it was such a weird moment, but everybody was so tired.
We were all just shells of humans.
Empty.
Yeah. No, I remember that actually distinctly when you say that too. And to be honest, normally like I would rush in and get my hands on an antler or something like that, but we all just stood around for probably 10, 15 minutes. Hands down the most powerful hunt I've ever been on for different reasons than I've ever had to experience. Well, and then too, you've got meat care after all of that goes down, right? Mm-hmm. So, we get back to camp and it's not like, okay, well, let's just all blow out and take a nap. We immediately drove to Alpine, Arizona, and dropped the meat off and got a much earned hot meal.
And a shower.
A shower. That's right. We got a shower, paid for a shower like a KOA, got a hot meal, but all that was still the same day that we packed him out. Like, and then we got home, spent the night.
We did more than spend the night. We stopped at like 1 p.m. and slept until 9 the next day morning, I think.
You two did. It was crazy.
You got up earlier.
Yeah, you two crawled into the Subaru at like 2 in the afternoon or something like that and slept. I thought you guys were dead. A couple of times I'm like going over there kind of like checking in the window, like, no, it looks like they're still breathing. I didn't know if you had asphyxiated in there. I mean, Brady can't have bad gas. We know that. Yeah, I thought maybe he had killed you. And then we decided at that point to part ways. You guys took a ton of the camp, as always, did a pile of the work of takedown and everything. Well, actually, we took it all down together, didn't we? Because we took the wall tent down together and all of it. And then you guys peeled out, headed home, and I went in for a solo 10.5 miler that was very much needed. And ironically, I called in 2 really nice, beautiful bulls right next to my kill site for the first time in the entire hunt by blowing on a couple raspy cow calls. There was bulls bugling in the basin when I got in there. I called a bull in from me to, 6 feet. Real big, pretty 6-point. And I'm like, where was that when I had Brady over my shoulder?
You got your little cell phone footage and called it good.
Yep. But it was therapeutic. You know, that last, again, you don't do a 10.5 mile deadhead without a lot of thought. And it was so beautiful and so many memories, like going through the whole hunt, the time spent with you guys, the time spent with my family, my dad, you name it. It was probably the best thing I could have ever done. I will say this, though. When I got back to the truck after that last round trip, I was like, if I never hunt another elk again, it'll be too soon.
Or shoot your bow again.
I was like, I never want to see another one of these big, stinky, heavy things. That was a big 48-hour push. But again, I'll be forever grateful to you, Promise, for being the right kind of person to have to share that kind of news with. You know, you just, like I said, immediately embraced me in a huge hug. I needed that because I didn't have that human touch. I just was on the phone with family and then helping me get ready, and then healing with the 2 of you, laughing, having a good time, making the most of tough hours.
We did have a blast, though.
We did.
It was fun.
Yeah, it turned my life around quicker. I'd have got there, but it was a huge head start, and I'll be eternally grateful that both of you were on that hunt with me. The one other thing I do remember, and again, this can be out of order or not in the podcast at all, but the night before, or the night that Dad died, was the night you and I went up and I worked, and we drove up to the radio towers. I remember those beautiful rainbows that night. We had the rain coming over and everything. We had all those beautiful rainbows that night. That was the night Dad passed. I didn't know that until I was looking back through my phone.
Oh, really?
Oh, that's right.
But because that's the night we came back, we might have taken a gummy. Hey, we're in Arizona. It's legal. And, you know, because that whole evening was kind of wrecked because I was like, dude, I got to go get some work done.
Yeah, and get it behind you because it was kind of something that was looming.
It was nagging at me, little bits and pieces, and I was like, if I just go get a few hours, I can start kind of throwing the shackles of work off.
And we had talked about going into, was it where we had gone the last night, or was it the island? Because we were going to make a big trip before, because Rue was supposed to come down, Brady was going to come in, and we were going to try to go do an overnight.
We were going to the island the next morning.
That's right.
That was the plan. That's why
you were getting up so early.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So her and I were going to go. It's a spot that Jed had told us to go to that required a nasty backpack trip, and definitely at least one overnight, or it's not worth going in there. And that's where we were headed the next day. We never did get to go. We went down and looked at it one day, but yeah, we never did get to go in there. But
I remember Promise messaging me when you guys were up at that radio tower, because I was still on the moose hunt, and she said something like, how am I supposed to make a film of Jerrod tapping on his laptop at the top of a cell phone tower?
We were in like a jar of artichoke hearts for dinner, just hanging out, watching the rainbow and
just putting a hurting on the whiskey.
We ended up killing a beautiful bull. I'll be grateful for him in different ways than any other elk I've ever killed for the rest of my life. Old bull that didn't have good genetics. He was always going to be kind of a scrubby looking thing, but cool character, twisty tines, super dark chocolate horns, and just exactly, I guess, what was meant to be in that hunt with minutes of daylight left.
That was my first hunt I had been on where somebody had killed a bull elk.
You'd never been with anybody who'd ever shot anything with a bow either, right?
No.
Wow, welcome.
A rough transition. I don't think I've ever had fewer emotions after shooting an animal in the short term than that. They all came tumbling out over the next few days, and the drive home, you know, once again, that's all solo and you got lots of time. Pretty set of elk antlers in the back windshield of the truck to look at and think about. As I slept like 5 different spots on the way home. I was so wiped out. I'd make it like an hour and a half, crash, make it hour and a half. Just kept texting Ruthie. I was like, don't worry about me. I'm pulling over. I don't got the gas in the tank to go all the way. Love you both. Appreciate you both. Thankful for making that memory what it was and capturing it. You know, again, I think that's one of the biggest things is having those memories on film surrounding an event like that will make it more visceral the rest of them.
Well, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And the film should be out on YouTube when this podcast is released, so go enjoy it.